One Piece, chapter 1114, The Wings of Icarus. So let's start there. So what's cool about the Wings of Icarus is I didn't know this myth at all. So I looked it up. And I learned some interesting things because it's tangled with another myth, another Greek myth, to do with the Minotaur. So King Minos commissioned Daedalus, Icarus's father, to build a labyrinth so complex that it would capture the Minotaur and he would never be able to get out. And it was built extraordinarily well. He did his job. Daedalus, again, Icarus's father, was an incredible inventor and could pretty much do what was set in front of him to do. Daedalus and Icarus did end up getting imprisoned. In some versions, they were imprisoned in a tower. In some versions, they were imprisoned in a labyrinth. I think maybe the tower might have been in the labyrinth. It doesn't really matter. They were imprisoned. Then they got out. Here's the thing that I want to point out to you. They were imprisoned. In some versions, they were imprisoned kind of as punishment because Daedalus was he was kind of part of making the Minotaur be created. And so it was like, you caused this, now fix it. Okay, now you're going to be punished for this. And in some versions, it was because the secret to how the labyrinth was created needed to be protected. And so they imprisoned Daedalus and Icarus in order to keep the secret of how to get out of the labyrinth. Because the labyrinth was so successfully made, it was so complicated that that even Daedalus himself almost couldn't get out of it because it was just good. No one could do it. So they had to imprison the author of the labyrinth in order to keep it away. So there's a couple of similarities. There's a couple of things that we can draw from that. In one version, Daedalus was the reason why the labyrinth was needed, and that's why he was taken out. And of course, we can draw that back with the obvious parallels of Einstein as well, of Vegapunk being a part of creating, of developing technology that then ended up getting weaponized. But also in this chapter, we're talking about the Void Century, secrets kept. The reason Vegapunk needs to be silenced is because he could potentially give the secret, the information to how to get out of the labyrinth, the information of the Void Century that he was never supposed to be studying because that's one of his mortal sins. Plus, Daedalus, Icarus's father, was an extraordinary inventor. He was the greatest inventor of his time, and a lot of things were attributed to Daedalus inventing and creating for mankind, one of which being he created sails. He was the reason people were able to set sail in sea for the very first time, which I just think is like, I don't know if Oda knows that. I don't know if that matters at all, but I think it's kind of neat that Daedalus was credited for that. He was the reason mankind was able to go out to sea. And then Oda also revealed to us that Joy Boy was the first pirate, which we'll come back to because I don't actually necessarily think that means that he was the first one to set sail to sea. But I just think that connection is fun for us to kind of smile at, even if Oda didn't mean it. But Daedalus was an incredible inventor. He was the inventor of his time. He was the reason so much progress was made for humanity according to this Greek myth. So Oda has made clear that we're supposed to draw parallels between Vegapunk and Einstein, but I think that it's kind of cool that with this chapter title, he also draws comparisons to Icarus as well as to Daedalus, who was the inventor of the wings that caused his son to fly too closely to the sun. So the myth, I'm sure you already know it, even though I didn't, because I'm not really well versed in Greek mythology, but I'm sure other people have talked about it, or you've had a Google. So the myth is that they were imprisoned in this tower/labyrinth, and the way that they got free was by creating these wings made of wax. And Daedalus warned his son, Icarus, don't fly too close to the ocean or else the sea spray will weigh you down, will land on the wings and weigh you down and you'll drown. Don't fly too close to the sun or else the heat will melt the wax and you'll fall. Icarus, both from the ground, people looked up at Icarus flying and thought he looked like a god. And then from the sky, Icarus was flying and felt like a god. So then he kept flying closer and closer to the sky because he felt like a god and thought, hey, I can do what I want. So I also like the parallels there because, one, we've been talking about the ocean and about Mother Nature and about how she sets herself against devil fruit users because they're unnatural. And you also have the celestial dragons who make themselves like gods. They make themselves fake gods. And Icarus and Daedalus, well, Icarus specifically felt like a god. People looked at him like a god, but it was a false. It wasn't true, and therefore he fell. I also read the line when I was just very quickly reading up on these things before I sat down to film. Icarus defied the laws of both man and nature. I think that that's pretty interesting because, again, we're talking about that in this series, defying the laws of man, obvious with the world government and with the elders and Emu and all the things, but then nature, again, eating a devil fruit is you're essentially setting yourself against Mother Nature, against the ocean. The ocean hates you because of it. I just think all these things are interesting. I mean, there's the most obvious parallel. Vegapunk himself says it, that he flew too close to the sun because he was experimenting, because he was trying to advance science, and his intentions were good, but in the wrong hands, it turned into a weapon which was catastrophic. Catastrophic. No, that was the right word. Why did I question myself? So the parallels are really obvious, and I'm sure you don't need me to draw those obvious parallels for you, so I thought it might be fun if I could draw some lesser parallels that are also fun to just kind of talk about. Maybe I took too long on that though, so let's move on. So the chapter begins with everybody reacting to what Vegapunk has just said. Some people were shocked, some people were in disbelief, some people were laughing. A few reactions that I found particularly interesting. One, Doflamingo and Magellan. Never really expected to see them just chilling together, like just in their off time when Magellan isn't running the prison like 2 seconds of his day or on the toilet like 23 hours of his day. In his downtime, he's chilling with Doflamingo, apparently, for reasons I don't know. What if seawater floods down into Impel Down? Isn't it your job to ensure the safety of the prisoners under your care, Magellan? That 1 meter rise the other day had the prison panicking. How many meters does it take to sink the whole world? And Doflamingo says, most cities in the world will be wiped out with an extra 5 meters of water. So extra 5 meters after Luletia, or extra 5 meters, now we only need 4 more. Either way, that's a really interesting measure to know. I wonder if Oda's going to play with that. I wonder if Oda's going to continue to have the elders destroy more islands and we're going to slowly watch that countdown happen. But it is interesting to actually have these parameters of what it would take, how many islands need destroyed in order to get us there. What do you think? Should we all move to much higher ground? Again, I'll direct you to this video where I talked about how it seems like a lot of kingdoms have, a lot of islands have already kind of flood-proofed themselves, some of which are very likely may have been at least somewhat in the know. Dressrosa was one of the islands that I talked about that seemed to have some flood-proofing around it, seemed to be raised up, seemed like it may have already known, and Doflamingo being in charge of that. It's just interesting to me. Kuzan's reaction is also quite interesting because Oda deliberately drew someone freaking out behind him, and then we have him who's just kind of there. And I don't know if it's because he's already defected from the world government, and so learning what the world government has, or learning a piece of what the world government has been hiding to him, he's just kind of taking it in, or if he already knew something, probably not. Saul is another really notable one. I just love to see him lounging there. I love his silhouette where he looks so happy, and then him laying back and laughing. It's beautiful. Another notable one is the celestial dragons. Obviously we have a bunch of celestial dragons that are mad about this messaging, saying, don't tell him, it's not good enough just to execute him, I want to mutilate his body. Like, they're furious. So I'm not of the thought that the celestial dragons know about the Void Century. I would reckon that they were just told by the elders. This is something that we don't want the world to know. We don't want this to get out because it would make them want to set themselves against us. So they've just been taught their whole lives. They've been indoctrinated. This is a secret that should be kept for good reason. Don't let the common folk, don't let the mortals, don't let the puny little insectile humans know about this thing, even though they too don't know about this thing. But what what's interesting to me isn't the celestial dragons raging because they don't want this to be known, but rather that singular panel of the one celestial dragon that's questioning. Void Sentry? What is that? Oda does love to have not a monolithic evil force. These people are bad because they're bad. He likes to have these people are bad, but there's that one that'll stand up for Princess Shirahoshi, or that one that'll stand up for the goldfish mermaid that I can't think of the name of, or that one that chooses to step away from the privilege and the opulence that they've been given and chooses to start a new life with his family outside of it. Like, Oda loves to show the people that are actually critically thinking about it and that are trying to start a change. And he's already done that with several celestial dragons up to this point, and it's just interesting that he zeroed in on one that's not rioting, that's not angry, that's not doing the reaction that should be, but rather that's questioning, that's thinking. And of course, Chow Chow. It's just nice to see Chow Chow. I'm happy we got a panel of him. All right, back to the beginning, now that I've gone through some of the reactions that I found interesting. The Five Elders are saying, destroy the transmission transponder snail. In fact, destroy any life form you can hear. So just anything you find within this vicinity, get it out of here. Life is irrelevant anyway when it's not ours we're talking about. So just destroy it all if we can get what we need. We need to shut off this transmission, and we need to get to the mother flame. So Vegapunk makes this prediction, or rather, I'm going to say calculation. He understands what he's created. He understands the science behind what he was commissioned to create. And because of that, he understands that when Lulicia is destroyed, that is going to cause a chain of events. That is going to cause earthquakes, which is going to cause the sea levels to rise. This is going to do exactly what it was. And I believe that it's a matter of science. It's a matter of, I understand the implications of this horrible thing that has been created. In my mind, it was supposed to be a thing of progress and of help to the greater world, and instead it's weaponized, and I understand the magnitude of using this as a weapon. So he says in his message, earthquakes are going to happen and the sea levels are going to rise. And if I'm wrong, ignore me. But if I'm right, listen. During all this, we have the reactions that I talked about. Some people laughing, some people disbelieving, some people listening. Again, Kuzan being one of those people. During this, we also have a fight sequence that's going on, which is Saturn fighting the Straw Hats. And this was a pretty chaotic fight scene, to be honest. What I do know is Chopper got stabbed with a poisonous claw, and I'm real upset about that. But anyway, Vegapunk says this earthquake was not a natural disaster. This was something caused, which leads to my second sin. I dreamt of a source of endless eternal energy to push the world forward into the future. I flew too close to the sun. Beautiful reference to the chapter title. Beautiful reference, beautiful display of his regret. I was trying to do something for the greater world and for advancement, and it ended up harming the greater world terribly. And you also have the parallel of Icarus fell to his death, and Vegapunk in his death has to deliver this message. So really, there's just parallels all over with this. I usually pay no recognition to the chapter title, but I think that this one is so beautifully tied into so many themes throughout this story, more than just the surface level, Icarus flew too close to the sun, but like there's so many smaller parallels that I think are really, really beautiful that Oda was playing with, that he was tying into and folding into this chapter. So Saturn walks into the lab. He kind of like is pulled back by how bright it is, by how magnificent, by how huge the impact of walking into the presence of the mother flame truly is. And then he starts beating it with a club. The comedy of this is so funny to me. Just like the old man who steps into the room with the mother flame that must be protected. We can't let it be destroyed. If everything else, even if this message gets out there, as long as we can make sure that we still have access to the mother flame, beat the control panel with a club. Old man, that's what you should do. I know we can have a discussion about the precision of, you know, maybe this big giant creature coming in, towering into this very delicate lab. Then no, it's stupid. He's beating it with a club, and it's funny. I think it's funny. Thank you, Oda, for this. I do wonder why what was repeated here is destroy every last sign of life in the lab, and that's what we're seeing Saturn beating. That's what's happening while we're seeing Saturn beat the control panel with a club. So I am curious about what life forms were there, because it seems like that's what Oda is drawing our attention to in that moment, is that line coupled with Saturn doing this. So is it more snails? Is it something to do with the control panel? Is it something to do with the mother flame? I don't know. I just thought that I would mention that. Oh, and my patrons did point out to me the A and MU would be translated essentially atom. A to mu. Atom would be how it would be. That would be how atom would be pronounced. At least that's what my patrons told me. I don't know. You can tell me if that's all wrong. But that all makes sense because, again, Oda's been drawing that parallel between Vegapunk and Einstein for a while now, so that all makes perfect sense. But this is the Mother Flame. We're finally getting a look at the Mother Flame, and this is what Tissine chose to depict, and she chose to depict it once again in the most artful, emotional, and perspective-altering way. And she really honed into the emotional impact of what Vegapunk has done in creating this Mother Flame and how it's being used. He's standing in front of this hugely powerful, hugely important creation that could have been used for good, but here he is with his regrets because of the harm that it's caused, regardless of what his intent was. The note she wrote to me is, the art title is Icarus, referring to Vegapunk. This is a bit of a poetic approach to the Mother Flame spread, where we also see Vegapunk talking about how he got too close to the sun. In my rendition, I wanted the flame to be a colorful, otherworldly kind of feeling as opposed to just red and orange flame. I imagine it would look mesmerizing in color. I think that this captures the emotional impact that Vegapunk is feeling in this chapter. He created something that could have been extraordinary, and now he looks at it as Icarus. And it's beautiful. And again, Tissine, my goodness, how do you produce such incredible artwork with such short turnaround every single week? She's cheating somehow. She's got a life hack that I don't know about. Again, Tissine's shop will be linked in the description of this video, so if you ever want to buy any of her prints, please do support her. Or support her online just by giving her a shout out. She's amazing. She's linked in the description. So he goes on to explain the Void Century, the poneglyphs, that it was illegal to study the Void Century, but he chose to do so anyway, and he doesn't regret it because history tells a story. I'm going to remember that because I think Oda's going to probably tie that into something in the next chapter. That's my expectation. I wonder if it's because he's about to tell the story of Joy Boy. Are we going to get a very, very short flashback? I mean, Vegapunk has a very short amount of time to tell his story, but I'm kind of wondering if that's a hint. History tells a story, so let me start the story with Joy Boy. Do you think it could happen? I don't know. Anyway, he's not going to speculate. He's not going to fill in the gaps. He's only going to tell us what's true and what we know. I also want to give a little shout out to Edison. My favorite Vegapunk, I'll remind you, when we saw him calculate the risk of jumping off the cloud and he decided to take the damage, now we see what he was doing. He was getting into the control room to extend the cloud so that we could get the Sunny into the ocean and not launching off and onto the land and being destroyed. And these two eensy little panels of Edison in the control room, and then we see his little eye peeking out and a little smile, and he says, "And don't let the world government lay a finger on ya." Oh, I just had to sit there with that panel a little bit when I first read it, because it says so much in that little panel of his tenacity, his sacrifice, his willingness to put himself in danger for them. It really speaks to me. In other words, what I know is an incomplete story of that 100-year void. It would be dishonest to fill the blanks in with my own speculation, so I will leave you with only the verified truth. the main character of this story, was born into a kingdom with an impossibly advanced civilization 900 years ago. Like the sun god Nika, spoken of in the Elbath legend, he fought with a body that stretched and contracted. His name was Joy Boy, and he was the very first man on the sea to be called a pirate. And while he's giving us this little bit more information about Joy Boy, we're watching Luffy, who's up in the air laughing and playing while he's fighting them. And he's like, this one's gonna do it. This is gonna be the one. He punches the board and it hurts. Even in Gear 5th, it hurts so much. And all the while we have the giants laughing because they have the knowledge of sun god Nika that's been passed down to them. They know who they're in the presence of. Even though the world is seemingly ending and these demonic immortal creatures are fighting them and they're making no headway. It seems like there's no way out. Even Luffy here is fighting them and getting nowhere, and in fact getting hurt. They laugh because they know the legend of sun god Nika. They know that they're in the presence of the carrier of the Nika Nika fruit. And so even though the world is on fire around them, they laugh because they know who they're in the presence of. And I just think that that's like really impactful. I think that that's just such a great delivery of that while we learn a little bit more about Joy Boy. And on the surface, learning that he was the first one to be called a pirate seems like a nothing burger, but it is kind of interesting to speculate because buccaneers and pirates are kind of one and the same. A privateer is someone who is commissioned by the government to fight enemy ships. A buccaneer was someone who fought enemy ships of their own volition. They didn't do it under the permission of the government. Why was that so hard? The buccaneers were fighting in the Caribbean Sea in the 17th century. They were known for their raids on the Spanish colonies and ships. And as I understand it, pirates essentially were buccaneers that went global. They would fight any ship. They weren't like the specific group of people, but they were anyone who were under their own law, under their own ruling. They didn't fight under the government, under any government. They fought for themselves. They would raid and pillage anyone that they would come across. So the way I'm interpreting this, I certainly don't think that what's being implied here in this chapter is that Joy Boy was the inventor of sails, like Daedalus. Not that Joy Boy was the first to set sail to sea. In fact, even in the chapter, he says he was the very first man on this sea to be called a pirate. So I reckon it's more along the lines of the isolated versus global. So there were people on the sea who were doing whatever in their region, and Joy Boy was the first one that kind of looked out and said, I want to go out there. I want to go further. I want to go more. And it was as well, alongside that, it was not being under government sanction. So Joy Boy was the first one to detach from the government, to not be under any sort of kingdom, and to go out to the wider world. And someone called him a pirate. I reckon probably the world government called him a pirate to villainize him, to say, look at that. Look at this criminal. Look at this person who has gone against the world government's laws. And they tried to villainize Joy Boy by giving him the moniker pirate. And then you know, years and years and years and years down the line, we have Roger, who started the golden age of piracy, who romanticized piracy and convinced people to go out, to go find the treasure that Joy Boy long, long ago buried. Why? Probably that's why Joy Boy was given the moniker pirate. Probably that's why Joy Boy was seen as, was villainized by the world government, because Joy Boy hid the One Piece, which is probably something that will help whoever finds it take down the world government as it is now. Stop the greater powers from oppressing the people and controlling and erasing islands and all the terrible things that they're doing. So this isn't a reveal that really tells us a ton more than we already knew, but it is a reveal that implies a lot. So I'd love to hear your implications. What do you think? I would love to hear what you think of the chapter. How did you find it? What are some things that you noticed that I didn't see? I'll see you again soon. Bye.